To my many supporters, many of whom are here today, who continue to urge me to appeal to the Ninth Circuit and even the U.S. Supreme Court, I say I hear you, but the time has come to accept the practical realities of our current legal circumstances. We shall abide by the court's decisions, even if we do not agree with them.
And that was Joe Miller just an hour ago in Alaska. He announced he's giving up his court challenge to Senator Lisa Murkowski's write-in victory. But Miller also said standing down is not an option. So what does that mean, and what's next for Joe Miller? He joins us live now from Anchorage. Happy New Year to you, and thanks for joining us, Joe.
Happy New Year. Thanks for having me.
Joe, I want to know, have you called Lisa Murkowski yet, or do you have plans to call and officially concede?
I have not called her. In fact, I don't have her number.
Okay, but presumably you could get her number from the state Republican Party if you wanted to, and I think a lot of people are wondering, given how far this has gone, and now we're about to have the new Congress sworn in, are you going to try to get that number and actually officially concede so that there'll be some closure here?
Well, I think we already have conceded. We've asked for it before. I don't have it. But that's not the point. The point is that this nation faces dramatic issues. I mean, we're facing a debt right now, a debt load. This is what drove us into the race that is simply unsustainable. And what we've done during the election is we sounded the alarm bell. And I'm hopeful that those in Congress, and we've certainly seen some indicator that at least the lame duck Congress doesn't understand this, hopefully the new Congress will, that if we don't turn things around soon, this nation is going to have a serious problem on its hands. And that's what I'm going to continue to work toward. Certainly not to encourage those that are there to continue their big spending that really is creating the fiscal crisis that we have.
Joe, I'm glad you brought up the lame duck Congress because session of Congress, because in your campaign, the Senate campaign, we heard you hit President Obama pretty hard about spending in Washington. But we saw in that lame duck session, it was not just President Obama, it was Republican leaders joining him in both the House and Senate. Are you going to be as tough on them, on your fellow Republicans, and hold their feet to the fire and urge them to stop some of this spending? There was a tax deal worth $800, $900 billion. Are you going to speak out and hold their feet to the fire as well?
Well, first of all, you don't tax your way out of a recession, but I will tell you that I have never been somebody that you can categorize or pigeonhole in a way that makes me a loyalist to some sort of party. I will tell you that the Republican Party, its foundation, its party platform is phenomenal. It speaks to limited government. But you're right that both parties have gotten us into the point that we are today. We have got to turn the nation around. The only way that you can do that is to hold all leaders accountable, whether on the Democrat side or the Republican side. And unless people get a wake-up call on both sides of the aisle, we're going to continue to be where we're at. In fact, it's going to drive us into an economic collapse. I'm convinced of that.
Joe, let's talk about one of your fellow Republicans, Sarah Palin. Now, she obviously was very helpful to you early on in your campaign, but some of your fellow Republicans have noticed that during this fight with Senator Murkowski, she was a little less vocal in support of you. What do you read into that? Is there any distance now between you and Sarah Palin? And if she does run for president in 2012, will you join up and support her, help her try to get elected?
Yeah, not at all. In fact, I mean, the argument that was had during the race or post-race is a legal argument. It's not one where campaigning is appropriate. It's not one where somebody gets out and starts making stump speeches for a candidate. Certainly, Sarah PAC donated to our recount fund. We're very gracious to receive that. A number of other groups, a number of other people also donated. Senator DeMint was key to assisting in that effort as well. And they certainly continued to stand behind us. But really, ultimately, what this was about was creating transparency in the Alaska election system. That's what our fight was about, making sure that the votes were counted appropriately, that ballot security was maintained, things that I think all Alaskans really now appreciate. In fact, our legislature, both sides of the aisle, are introducing legislation to fix many of the problems that we identified during this post-election count. So it's not a campaign issue. It's an issue about the integrity of elections, something that Alaska, and I think the whole country, given the core democratic system that we have, should be very concerned about and should be thankful that we basically had the backbone to do it.
Well, Joe, in that election and what you've contested thus far about ballots, we've just gotten a statement that's come in from Senator Murkowski. I want to read it quickly. I was glad to learn that Joe Miller has bowed to the rulings of the Alaska courts and decided to abandon his challenges. Although certification was a long time coming, it does not diminish the historic accomplishment of our campaign. All Alaskans, regardless of how they voted, can be assured that I will continue to work in Alaska's interest for the next 6 years. That's Lisa Murkowski. So I want to button up before. It doesn't sound like you're going to call her. It sounds like maybe, this is still sort of unresolved in some ways for you and your supporters. She's saying, look, I won fair and square. This is over. Do you agree?
Well, I'm not going to talk about sour grapes. There were a lot of things during the campaign that obviously I think should have been done differently. But frankly, what this is about is two completely different ideologies. One that embraces big government, one that says the only way forward for Alaska is continue to receive the extraordinary amount of federal funds that we've received in the past without looking to the private resource base. I mean, when this nation faces that bankruptcy day, which if we continue in the direction we're going, that's going to happen. Alaska, which is so incredibly dependent on federal funding, is going to fall flat on its face. And so I think the charge that has got to be let is continue to fight against that growth. You know, we have no ill will towards Senator Murkowski. We have absolutely nothing to dispute as far as the finality of this race right now, but we have significant difference of opinion about where this nation needs to head and about what our state needs to do to prepare for the future. And I think it's something that growing numbers of Americans across the political spectrum see as a need. And I think everyone sees that shares this concern, the federal government as being the core of that problem. And that's why we campaigned on a states' rights agenda, that the federal government needs to be minimized, the state power needs to increase in such a way to get responsibility closer to home and away from D.C., where these out-of-control politicians and bureaucrats are continuing to dig us out, our nation so deep that we aren't going to be able to pull out. Now, you know, this is a new year, and I'm hoping that we've got the numbers to turn things around. That's our hope for this nation. I'm optimistic it can happen.
On that point, I want to give you 30 last seconds, Joe, on a very important substantive issue that you talked about in the campaign, Social Security reform. We're going to have the first baby boomer at midnight turn 65. People are wondering whether Social Security is going to be bankrupt or not. You talked about reforming it. Some of your fellow Republican candidates who did as well, Mr. Buck in Colorado, Sharon Angle in Nevada, they also lost like you did. Does that discourage you that both parties are not going to take a serious look at reforming Social Security? I'll give you 30 seconds.
Well, it bothers me that they aren't, because the end result of that is catastrophe, but I'm encouraged because so many people recognize it as a major issue. And certainly, truth be told, we are going to confront the reality that reform is absolutely critical, or else our elderly are going to be left holding the bag. So it's something that we can't avoid. We've got to address it.
Joe Miller, we appreciate you joining us on New Year's Eve. Happy New Year to you and your family, and we look forward to seeing you in the future.
Happy New Year to you. Thank you.